Chapter 84. Their duty was to guard this place. Without orders from above, no one was allowed to casually approach this place and pick the fruits. However, the orders given by the higher-ups depended on the person involved. For example, Yang Chendong, the discoverer and cultivator, was definitely not an exception. The fields here all belonged to the Yang family, so of course he could do whatever he wanted. As long as it was not a large-scale harvest, even the people of the East faction guards had no right to interfere. Each of the girls carried the freshly dug potatoes and returned to the kitchen with Yang Chendong. Each Yoer had already prepared everything they needed. Soon, the aroma spread. At noon, the four of them ate until their stomachs were round and full. They were extremely satisfied. You have to learn to share. Good things can't be eaten by yourself. When you leave, each of you bring some for your family to taste. Yang Chendong smiled as he looked at Yang Duo and Hu Yen. Seeing how they looked as if their bellies were about to burst, he couldn't help but stretch out his right hand and lightly scratch the tips of their noses. This was originally Yang Chendong's habitual action. In the past, he often played like this with Xiao Yin. However, this time, he was facing seventh sister Yang Duo and Hu Yen, who he had just met for the first time. Yang Duo was slightly better. She just treated it as her brother joking with her. However, Hu Yan's face immediately flushed red after being scratched. This seemingly habitual action by Yang Chendong was actually very intimate and flirtatious in her eyes. Only after he scratched her nose did Yang Chendong feel that his actions were somewhat inappropriate. However, the matter had already been done. It was too late to apologize. Instead, it would destroy this beautiful atmosphere. He immediately clapped his hands and said, "Sister Chioer, bring a few of the drinks that we prepared beforehand." Chioer complied. Then, a few servants carried a few transparent cups and placed them on the table. The cups were transparent glasses from the future. There were a few drinks that had already been prepared. The moment the things were placed on the table, other than Xiao Yin, who had already seen the transparent glass, Hu Yen and Yang Duo were once again shocked by the things in front of them. They realized that as long as they stayed in the Yang manor, there would always be all kinds of surprises waiting for them, and they were all existences that were far beyond their imagination. Don't just stare at the glass. Why don't you try this drink? Yang Chendong smiled as he looked at the shocked duo. You call this a glass? So exquisite, so beautiful. Hu Yen couldn't help but ask curiously. Yes, this is called a glass cup. It's an improved product of colored glass. It's more transparent and gives people a clearer feeling. As Yang Chendong explained, he picked up the glass in front of him and took a sip. Try it. The drinks inside are the real delicacies. I guarantee that none of you have tasted it before. Of course, no one had tasted it before. No matter if it was the apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, milk tea, or fruit tea placed in front of them, none of them had ever seen or heard of them before, let alone tasted them. The three women imitated Yang Chendong and began to taste it. They couldn't stop once they tasted it. In the end, they drank until their bellies were round and full. At this moment, they were a bit regretful. If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have eaten so much at lunch. Now that there was delicious food in front of them, they could only look and not drink. It was too much of a pity. The three women ate and drank their fill. It was already the middle of the afternoon. Only then did they feel that time had passed too quickly. Thinking that they were ready to go home, Yang Duo and Hu Yan's faces revealed expressions of reluctance. Seeing the two's intentions, Yang Chendong said to Yang Duo, "Seventh sister, this is your maiden home. If you don't want to go back, just stay here." This was something that Yang Chendong could only say to Yang Duo, but he couldn't do anything about Hu Yen. If he were to ask her to stay, he would definitely be treated as a lecher. He was afraid that when night fell, Hu Zhangning would kill him with a knife. "Thank you, sixth brother. Seventh sister, I still have to go back. No matter what, I am still a member of the Wang clan. Yang Duo shook her head and rejected Yang Chendong's good intentions. However, from her words, it could be heard that she was somewhat moved by the sixth young master's suggestion. That's right. Instead of wasting her youth and beauty on Wang Go who didn't know how to cherish himself, why not learn to be herself? Were other people's opinions really that important? Knowing that seventh sister wanted to be strong, before she made a decision, she had to do her own part. Yang Chendong couldn't persuade her anymore. However, he was not completely unprepared. He clapped his hands 3 times in the air, and then 10 young girls dressed like maids came in from outside. Looking at the 10 girls walking over, Yang Duo and Hu Yen were stunned. Even Xiao Yin, who didn't understand, looked at Yang Chendong with a puzzled expression. She didn't understand what the young master wanted to do. The 10 of you, listen up. In the future, my 7th sister, Yang Duo, will be your master. You have to serve her with all your heart. Every month, this young master will give you 2 taels of silver as a monthly allowance. During festivals, your family will also receive some rice, noodles, and meat. In short, you will not be treated unfairly. However, if I hear that 7th sister has suffered any grievances in the Wang family in the future, then each and every one of you will be punished. Do you understand? After the 10 people stood in place, Yang Chendong's cold voice suddenly rang out. Yang Chendong, who was like a completely different person from before, unconsciously emitted the aura of a superior person, causing Hu Yen, who was watching from the side, to be a little dazed. How could this person change so quickly? Just now, he was like the sun hanging high in the sky, which could melt people. At this moment, he was like the cold wind of winter, making people feel a chill go straight to the bottom of their hearts. We understand. The 10 girls all bowed and replied in unison. Only then did the chill on Yang Chendong's body disappear. He then looked at the stunned Yang Duo and said, 7th sister, this is what 6th brother prepared for you. They will be by your side in the future. If you need anything, just call them. 6th brother will settle all the expenses with them. Don't worry. With Yang Chendong's current financial resources, how many people couldn't be supported by him? It was just giving 7th sister 10 maids, it wasn't worth mentioning. As for Yang Duo, when she saw the 10 maids, she couldn't help but cry. When she married into the Wang family, there was a maid by her side. Unfortunately, after a serious illness, the maid couldn't survive and died. Only she was left alone. When she was bullied, she could only silently endure it in her heart. Ever since 6th brother appeared, everything had changed. The Wang family no longer dared to scold and beat her like before. Not only that, there were now 10 more maids. This was equivalent to raising her status all of a sudden. As such, she no longer had to worry about others giving her a hard time. This time, she truly felt the warmth of a family. 6th brother, thank you. She stretched out her hand and tightly patted Yang Chendong's big hand. 7th sister, you are my biological sister. Doing anything for you is what I should do. Oh right, when you leave in the future, bring some things back. With these 10 maids, 1,000 taels a month won't be enough. I'll give you double. 2,000 taels shouldn't be a problem. When the time comes, don't have the money to reward them. That would be too embarrassing. Also, prepare some food and clothes. If you are in a bad mood, don't eat with the Yang family and just cook for yourself. But there is one thing, you must not tell the other sisters. Otherwise, they will say that 6th brother favors one and discriminates against the other. When he said the last sentence, Yang Chendong had a bitter expression, as if he had suffered a great grievance. Yang Duo, who was originally very touched, was about to cry again. However, when she heard that she couldn't tell the other older sisters, she immediately pursed her lips and smiled. At that moment, she really looked back and smiled charmingly, making the 6 palaces pale in comparison. However, after laughing, Yang Duo still shook her head. You'll be paying for these maids' expenses. Seventh sister, why would I need so much money? 1,000 taels a month is more than enough to spend. Yang Duo wanted to refuse, but unexpectedly, Xiao Yin spoke up. Seventh young lady, this is a small token of appreciation from the young master. You should accept it. Xiao Yin's identity was only Yang Chendong's personal maid. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to speak up in this kind of situation. But everyone could see that the sixth young master's attitude towards her was very unusual. If things didn't go well, she might become a concubine in the future. This was equivalent to marrying into the Yang family and becoming half a Yang family member. Who would look down on her then? Right, right. Seventh sister only needs to accept this from sixth brother. Save up the excess and use it as a dowry in the future. Yang Chendong chuckled. But when he said this, Yang Duo's face turned even redder. She even buried her head deeply. After dealing with Yang Duo's matter, Yang Chendong looked at Hu Yen. Miss Hu, thank you for accompanying my seventh sister this time to relax. In order to express my gratitude, I have prepared some things. I'll have to trouble you to bring them along when you leave. Yang Chendong didn't say what it was and Hu Yen was smart enough not to ask. It was as if everything was in tacit agreement. An hour later. The 3 carriages slowly left the gates of the Yang village. There were 2 more carriages than when they came. Not only that, there were 5 maids standing beside each carriage. These were all going to follow Yang Duo back to the Wang family. It could be imagined that when these people arrived at the Wang family, Wang Go and that unreasonable mother, Lady Yen, would be shocked. Not to mention how Yang Duo was after returning to the Wang family. After Hu Yen entered the city, she separated from Yang Duo. Behind the carriage she was in, there was another carriage following. The coachman was Yang Lu. This carriage was a gift from Yang Chendong to Hu Yen. He said it was to thank her for bringing seventh sister out to relax. But as for the real reason, only the 2 of them knew. Chapter 85. Hu Yen, who was sitting in the carriage, had a look of joy on her face. She even thought shyly that this wouldn't be the engagement gift from Dong Shui, right? But she just didn't know what was inside. Was there the toilet paper that she promised her father? She was excited and worried all the way. When she arrived at the gate of the Hu mansion, Lieutenant Gao, who followed her, immediately asked the gatekeeper to find someone to unload the things. After the bags were unloaded, Yang Lu drove the carriage back, leaving behind Hu Zhangning, who had heard the news and rushed over with a look of surprise. Yen, what are these things? Don't tell me it's all toilet paper. Hu Zhangning asked in confusion. Father can see for himself. Daughter is tired and wants to go back to rest. She was holding a small package, which contained her white cheongsam and the sketch. In her opinion, these were the most important things. But after answering this sentence, Hu Yen didn't care what Yang Chendong gave her. She turned and left, leaving Hu Zhangning with a puzzled look. He had to let people carry the things into the courtyard first, and then look at them one by one. Needless to say, there must be toilet paper in the gift, and there was a lot of it. In the morning, the housekeeper of the Hu mansion and the housekeepers of the other ministers went to Yang village to ask for toilet paper, but to no avail. Then Hu Yen appeared. Presumably, they were more or less related, so this thing naturally couldn't be left out. Not only that, but there were also other good things sent, such as toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, cosmetics, and so on. There were also food, such as freshly dug potatoes and boxes of canned fish. There were all kinds of flavors in the canned fish. With the geographical location of Qiqian City, fishing was not a problem at all. As long as this thing was sealed well and the taste was unique, there would naturally be no problems. The things were opened one by one, and Hu Zhangning sighed. This Yang Shima was really generous. Of course, what made him the happiest was that these were all obtained by Hu Yen. Did that mean that this kid also took a fancy to his daughter? Whether it was a match in terms of social status or talent, it seemed that the marriage between the two families was more suitable. 100 Flowers Hall. Yesterday, after the two songs were played, the reputation of this place went up a notch. Tonight, there were even more people coming, which made the head procuress, Mu Lily, smile all night long. It was a pity that there were too few tables in 100 Flowers Hall, and the place was not big enough. Otherwise, she would be able to earn more money. Just like before, the moment the two songs were played, everyone on the stage cheered. At the same time, voices urging them to stay rose and fell, as if they wanted to flip the roof of 100 Flowers Hall over. However, Madame Xue paid no attention to this and continued to walk down the platform. There were a total of 2 new songs. If she sang them over and over again, she was afraid that sooner or later, she would get tired of listening to them. This was not what she wanted. Madame Xue walked down the platform. Many people in the crowd disagreed with her. They all shouted to express their dissatisfaction. However, among the crowd, there was a man dressed in a brocade robe. He had a pointy mouth and cheeks that resembled a monkey's cheeks. Instead, he used all of his strength to raise his hands and flip the table in front of him to the ground. Following that, he shouted, "This general didn't allow you to leave? You can try to leave." The big movement of the table being flipped naturally attracted countless people's attention. For a moment, the hall became quiet. Even Madame Xue, who was about to leave, could not help but stop and look back. It was precisely this glance that caused him to be filled with terror. She knew that man. It was Xisheng, the Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard. When it came to Xisheng, not many people knew of him. However, when it came to his elder brother, very few people didn't know of him. He was the eunuch Xi Ning, the eunuch who betrayed the great Ming dynasty and was executed by 1,000 cuts. However, the change of the Tumu castle had not happened yet. Naturally, Xi Ning was still in power and was even favored by the emperor. He also had a good relationship with Wang Zhen, the chief steward of the ceremony directorate. With such a powerful elder brother, Xisheng naturally did things without scruples. In addition, he was a Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard, which made him even more domineering. Just last year, he bullied Jianghu, the Duke of Ying, who had been a senior official for several dynasties and made outstanding contributions to the army. Jianghu did not dare to say anything and had a lot of land taken away from him. Today, he was here and flipped the table. How could the others not be shocked when they saw him? Especially Zhang De, the second son of Jianghu, who was in the crowd. Although his eyes were full of hatred, he did not have the courage to intervene in this matter. Even Duke Ying's son did not dare to intervene. Seeing this, the others could only endure and did not dare to say a word. Xisheng seemed to be very satisfied with the way people looked at him. He laughed and pointed at Madame Xue, saying, "I haven't heard enough. Sing one more time." As an entertainer, Madame Xue had seen many things like this. However, she still felt nervous. She felt that Xisheng did not come just to listen to the song. He probably had other purposes. Since he was not as powerful, he had to obey. Seeing Xisheng's domineering and arrogant attitude, Madame Xue knew that she could not avoid it today. She had to force a smile and bow to him. Then she turned to the stage. The procuress, Mu Lily, immediately arranged for someone to prepare a new table and send it to Xisheng. Xisheng then crossed his legs and raised his head, looking insufferably arrogant as he continued to listen to Madame Xue's song. "Your Excellency, Madame Xue's skin is really good. If I can hug her for one night, my life will not be in vain." The subordinate beside him flattered and looked at Madame Xue on the stage, drooling. "It's not difficult. I have to be on duty tonight. Forget it. Tomorrow is my day off. I'll come here to have fun for one night." By the way, check the person behind Baihua Hall. Tell him that I like this place and want to buy it. Xisheng said indifferently. Even Duking had been bullied by him. She was just an insignificant entertainer. How could she jump to the top? Yes, Your Excellency. I'll do it right away. The servant answered and turned to leave. A pimp who was serving tea to a guest at a nearby table had his ears pricked up. When he heard these words, he immediately revealed a look of fear. However, he quickly pretended to be calm. After thinking for a while, he went backstage. There was a limit to what a pimp could do. The benefits he could get from the kind of place he worked for were proportional. Baihua Hall's business was very good now, and they usually received a lot of rewards. However, if Madame Shui was replaced, they would get less money if something happened to her. They might not even be able to continue their business. For his own sake, he had to tell the procuress, Mu Lily, about this. Backstage, Mu Lily was looking at the stage with a worried expression. She was worried that something would happen later. As the big sister of the 100 Flowers Hall's procuress, she naturally knew what kind of person Xisheng was and what kind of morals he had. Miss Mu. The pimp came to Mu Lily's side and whispered in her ear what he had just heard. Then, Mu Lily's expression turned into one of shock. Her originally pretty face turned pale at this moment. What should we do? Under Xisheng's threat, Madame Shui had to sing the 2 songs again. Fortunately, there were no more heckling. Xisheng walked out of Baihua Hall accompanied by several of his men. Everything seemed to be fine after the storm. Only Mu Lily, who had heard the news, knew that it was not that Xisheng wanted to stop, but that he had regarded Baihua Hall as his property. That was why he did not make trouble. Madame Shui went backstage, exhaled a long breath of fragrance, and wiped her forehead gently. When she saw Mu Lily coming from afar, she forced a smile and said, "Sister, I'm fine." "Well, it's not fine this time. It's serious." Mu Lily sighed and told Xiao Yuxue what she had just heard from the pimp. What? Sure enough, Madame Shui, who had heard the news, didn't look any better than Mu Lily did just now. Well. Sister, do you think our boss can sell Baihua Hall to Xisheng? If it's someone else, I don't know. But who is Xisheng? Last year, he even dared to occupy Duke Ying's fertile land, and nothing happened. I heard that the emperor punished them later, but now they have regained their prestige, haven't they? She did not say whether it was possible or not, but the comparison between Duke Ying and Madame Shui had proved her idea. What should we do? What should we do? Madame Shui was really anxious at this moment. She had thought that she could make more money as a young actress and a top courtesan. In this way, even if she was old and could not sing anymore, she would have enough money to spend the rest of her life. She could even find a good man to marry as long as she kept her chastity. But all of this seemed to have become a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Once 100 Flowers Hall became Xisheng's property, with the other party's character, he would probably eat her up that very night. Then, she would become a money-making tool. Once she grew old, she would probably become useless. Madame Shui shook her head desperately at the thought of all her efforts over the years. Her face was full of unwillingness. Yuxue, I don't want to do this. Is this our fate? We can't change it. Didn't you see that when Xisheng stood out, no one dared to say anything? This is the general trend. We can't change it. Mu Lily hugged Madame Shui and cried bitterly together. Chapter 86. No. There must be a way. There must be a way. Lady Snow shook her head, unwilling to accept such a fate. She had just learned 2 new songs from Dong Shui, and the whole capital knew about her. Seeing that everything was going well, she was unwilling to let her dream end before it even began. Yes, Dong Shui. For some reason, Yang Chendong's handsome and confident face flashed through Lady Snow's mind, the capital in the 9th month was not as hot as it was during the day at night, and when the cold wind blew, one would feel a chill. Outside the Yang village, Yang Chendong had washed up and was about to go to bed. At this time, Tiger's Mane's voice came from outside. "Young master, Lady Snow wants to see you." "What is she doing here so late at night?" Hearing that Lady Snow was here, he looked at the time. The curfew should have started in the capital. It would be very difficult for Lady Snow to return to 100 Flowers Hall at this time. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about what could make a girl come to him so late at night, Tiger's Mane's voice sounded again. "Young master, do you need me to wake Xiao Yin up and ask her to come?" "No need." Yang Chendong waved his hand. He had arranged for Xiao Yin to go to bed first. In his own words, women were made of water. If they wanted good skin, they needed good sleep. It was precisely this sentence that caused this habit to become a natural one. Unless there was something special, Xiao Yin would go to bed early. Right now, Xiao Yin was probably already asleep. Without knowing what the other party wanted, it wouldn't be appropriate to rashly wake Xiao Yin up. Forget it. Bring her to the study. Yang Chendong thought for a while, put on his coat, and then strolled toward the study. When Tiger's Mane took Lady Snow to the study, Yang Chendong was writing something with his head down. If someone was there, they would know that he was writing a classic play, The Legend of the White Snake, which was later made into a TV series and remade several times. It was also called The New Legend of the White Snake. Madame Snow was brought in. She was wrapped in a long robe, but she was wearing a pair of embroidered shoes that were convenient for walking on the platform. It could be seen that she had come out in a hurry. "Is something the matter?" She slowly raised her head and looked at Madame Shui from head to toe. She sighed that no matter what she dressed up, she could always attract men's attention. Madame Shui, who had been afraid and anxious, calmed down a lot after Yang Chendong looked at her. She didn't know why. But when she thought of the problems that 100 Flowers Hall might face, she knelt on the ground with a plop. "Dong Shui, save me. Please save Lady Shui." If there's anything, get up and talk." Yang Chendong put down the writing brush in his hand and looked at Madame Snow. "What's the matter? Tell me in detail." Madame Snow lowered her head and cried. She was really pitiful. While crying softly, she told him what had happened in 100 Flowers Hall in the evening. She also told him what the pimp had overheard and what Mu Lily had said to her. Xisheng. When Yang Chendong heard the name, he felt it was familiar. But he had only been in the capital for a few days. How could he know everyone? In particular, Xisheng was just a Jianghu of the brocade guard, a nobody in his eyes. Seeing Yang Chendong's confusion, Tiger's Mane, who was standing next to him, quickly took out a book. After searching for a while, he found Xisheng's name. He handed the book to Yang Chendong. "Young master, please take a look." He took the book and saw Xisheng's name. The investigation of the Security Bureau was written on it. Humph. What the hell? When Yang Chendong saw that Xisheng had a brother named Xi Ning, he remembered this person. Xi Ning was a famous traitor in history. Because of him, the capital was almost captured. Seriously speaking, if Yu Qian hadn't stood up for him, the whole capital would have fallen because of him. At that time, the history of the Great Ming Dynasty would have been rewritten. When Yang Chendong got angry, Tiger's Mane naturally emitted a murderous aura. "Young master, do you need me to go to the city now to find this person?" And then, Madame Snow knelt in front of him. Obviously, she couldn't see Tiger's Mane's beheading gesture. But Yang Chendong saw it clearly. "No, it's not necessary. At this time, you still have to go to the city. However, I'm afraid that you'll still have to make a trip into the city. Do you know who the current owner of 100 Flowers Hall is?" "Young master, it's Fan Ling. He was the vice director of the Ministry of War, a secondary class level 5 official. His father used to be the minister of Honglu Temple. As expected of the director of the security bureau, Tiger Shine, who had slowly gotten into his role, quickly reported the other party's identity. Of course, all this had a close relationship with 100 Flowers Hall that Yang Chendong had paid attention to. Find him and buy Madame Snow's slave contract. Yang Chendong made a decision after a short hesitation. It was not the right time to have a direct conflict with a villain like Xisheng. At least, he couldn't look for trouble. There was only one way to solve the problem, which was to buy Madame Snow. In this way, even if Xisheng got 100 Flowers Hall, he would only get an empty shell. Yes. Tiger's Mane immediately understood the meaning of the sixth young master. He answered and turned to leave. Wait. Madame Snow suddenly said. She came to Yang Chendong for help, but it was just an impulsive act. She didn't have any hope. Dong Shuai was powerful, but he was only talented. Compared to power, he was much weaker. She didn't think that the sixth young master could do anything to Xisheng, who even Du Qing, a hero of the great Ming dynasty, couldn't afford to offend. However, she never thought that Yang Chendong would agree to her request so easily. Moreover, he even wanted to buy her slave contract directly. Amidst his excitement, he thought of his elder sister, Mu Lily. If he left and his elder sister did not, he could imagine how Xisheng would treat him. It would be a fate worse than death. There was also her maid Xiao Wei. She had been using her for so many years, so she couldn't give her up. At this time, Madame Snow didn't realize that she came to ask for help. She didn't have such awareness. She just thought about how to take her family members to her side, so she shouted, "Wait. Is there anything else?" Yang Chendong looked at Madame Snow with a puzzled expression. Did she still want to stay in 100 Flowers Hall? If so, it would be more difficult to help her. Yes, please understand, Dong Shuai. This servant still has my elder sister Mu Lily and the maid Xiao Wei, in 100 Flowers Hall. If this servant leaves alone, Yang Chendong understood that this was a loyal and affectionate Madame Snow. He liked this kind of person. He immediately said to Tiger's Mane, who was still standing there, "Did you hear that? There are 3 people in total. Buy their slave contracts. Don't be afraid to spend money. Go." "Yes." Tiger's Mane answered and turned to leave. As for how to enter the city in the middle of the night, it was not a problem for Yang Chendong, the number 1 master beside him. The matter was solved. Although she didn't see the answer, Madame Snow couldn't help but trust Yang Chendong. Especially at this time, the confidence he showed made her feel infatuated. Only the 2 of them were left in the room. Suddenly, there was a very awkward and ambiguous atmosphere in the study. Yang Chendong was the first to feel the difference. At this time, he regretted that he didn't let Tiger's Mane take Madame Snow to rest first, so he wanted to call for help. He knew that even if Tiger's Mane wasn't here for the time being, Beta Persei, Yang Si and the others would be outside. It could be said that whenever he needed, they would appear at any time. But for some reason, Yang Chendong didn't want to let anyone take Madame Snow away. In this very contradictory mood, he looked at Madame Snow and said unconsciously, "Well, I'll arrange for someone to take you to rest." This was obviously not an order, but a tone of negotiation. Madame Snow was delighted, but she quickly shook her head. "No. I'm not sleepy now." "What are you writing, Dong Shuai?" After saying this, Madame Snow stood up and walked to Yang Chendong leisurely. Faced with Madame Snow's approach, Yang Chendong, who could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, could clearly feel his heart beating faster at this moment. In order to ease the awkwardness, he casually said, "I'm writing a story about love." "Really?" Dong Shuai's literary talent has long been known in the capital. "I wonder if I have the luck to read it first." It seemed that she was asking, but when she finished speaking, she had taken the initiative to walk to Yang Chendong's side and bent down. Because the temperature in the study was suitable, Madame Snow had already taken off her coat and robe. At this time, she was wearing a wide-collared top. When she lowered her head, Yang Chendong saw a touch of Snow White looming in front of him. Some things couldn't be ignored just because you didn't want to. On the contrary, some things you said you didn't want to think about, but you couldn't help thinking about it in your heart. At this time, Yang Chendong was obviously the latter. His eyes followed the touch of Snow White and seemed to see two tall mountains. Madame Snow's skin was very white. Among all the women he knew, only Hu Yen could be compared with her. As the saying went, 100 ugliness could cover up 100 ugliness, not to mention that Madame Snow was a first-class beauty. Against the dim light of the oil lamp in the study, she really made people feel that they were looking at a beauty under the lamp. The more they looked at her, the more attracted they were. Madame Snow seemed to be looking down at Yang Chendong's manuscript, but in fact, she had been paying attention to his changes. Although she was a performer and not a prostitute, she had heard and seen a lot of things in the red light district, so she naturally knew how to interact with men. Chapter 87. At this moment, Madame Xue felt that the man beside her began to breathe heavily. His unique breath made Madame Xue's heart beat rapidly. He was handsome, talented, capable, domineering, confident, and had a good family background. When these advantages were concentrated on one person, it would naturally make him shine with incomparable brilliance. Not to mention that Yang Chendong was a hero who had just saved a beauty. Madame Xue was already in love with him. It was undoubtedly very important for her to find a man she could entrust her life to. Now, the man was right in front of her. What should she do? What would he do? Whether it was to repay the kindness or to repay the professor's kindness, should she devote herself to him? Or should she give herself to him? Both of them had pure bodies. In this kind of atmosphere, neither of them took the initiative to speak. Neither of them had the intention to break the ice. However, both of them were well aware of each other's thoughts. For a moment, this kind of feeling was indescribable and indescribable, but it was indeed extremely wonderful. Madame Xue remained motionless. She had been bending over for half a cup of tea's time, waiting for Yang Chendong to do something. She heard from the other sisters that at this time, shouldn't the man be more active? But why didn't Dong Shuai do anything? Yang Chendong was indeed hesitating. Logically speaking, he should have carried her in a domineering manner. His bedroom was not far away from the study, and then everything would have gone smoothly. There was even a voice in his heart urging him to do so, and even his body was supporting such a thought. However, Yang Chendong did not do so. Perhaps it was because of his conservative thinking. He thought that if he had sex with Madame Xue, it would be more or less taking advantage of her. He did not want to do so. He preferred success to come naturally. However, Yang Chendong also knew that if he persisted in this atmosphere, he was afraid that he would not be able to control his heart. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and said, "Madame Xue, it's a little late. I should go to bed." "Really? It just so happens that Xue is also sleepy. Why don't you let me warm Dong Shuai's bed?" Madame Xue was overjoyed. She thought that Yang Chendong said it on purpose for her to hear. How could she not take advantage of the situation and go downhill like a donkey? Originally, he wanted to find an excuse to separate them so that he could calm down. He never thought that it would lead to such a result. If he said no at this time, it would be too hurtful. Yang Chendong helplessly nodded and said, "All right then." The two of them walked out of the study one after the other and went to the bedroom. A figure slowly retreated from the darkness. Even if he wanted to protect the sixth young master, he still had to consider the situation. Sometimes, if he still wanted to exist, then it would not be protection, but rather, it would be a nuisance. Yang Chendong sensed that the eyes that were secretly watching him had left. He knew that from now on, only Madame Xue and himself were left. He could not help but feel a little restless. Should he really do something? Or is my manhood coming to an end tonight? Dong Shuai, I'll go in first. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about what to do next, Madame Shui had taken off her clothes and then plunged into the quilt. At that moment, Yang Chendong caught a glimpse of her snow-white body. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. Yang Chendong involuntarily got up and walked slowly to the bed. Yang Chendong's heart was beating faster and faster. Madame Shui, who had already slipped into the quilt, was also heartbeat faster. She even blushed from her face to her neck. Then she slowly closed her eyes, but her long eyelashes were still trembling, indicating that she was not asleep and had no intention of falling asleep. Yang Chendong finally finished walking a few steps. He involuntarily stretched out his arm. When he was about to touch the snow-white body that was bowing her head and even trembling, he forced himself to say, "Madame Shui, I'm not used to being warmed by someone, oh." Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a snow-white arm emerge from the blanket and wrap around his neck. A strong force assaulted him, causing Yang Chendong to uncontrollably burrow into the blanket along with his clothes. At the same time, a pair of gentle jade lips lightly touched Yang Chendong's lips, causing him to be unable to spit out a single word. The sweet liquid stirred in her mouth. Madame Shui, who was a little clumsy, tried her best to release the strength and courage of her first kiss. Yang Chendong cooperated with her. At first, he was passive, but soon he took the initiative. It seemed that the kiss could not satisfy him, so he turned around and pressed himself on her. Then he stared into Madame Shui's beautiful eyes and said, "Do you know that I'm in a wolf's den? How dare you take the initiative to provoke me? Have you thought about the consequences?" "No, and there's no need to think about it. It's my fortune to give myself to Dong Shui," Madame Shui said, panting. She seemed to have drained all her strength just now. At this moment, she did not know what to do except wait passively. Madame Shui's words made Yang Chendong's hormones rise. Since he was not afraid of a woman, what was there to be afraid of? If he abandoned her at this time, he would not be a beast, but worse than a beast, just like the story said. Yang Chendong made up his mind. He felt that his body had reached its limit, so he decided to release it. He slowly lowered his head and moved closer and closer to Madame Snow. When Yang Chendong thought that it was a matter of course, he suddenly noticed a drop of tear from the corner of Madame Shui's eye. It was this tear that cooled down Yang Chendong's burning body in an instant. What was he doing? Madame Shui came to him because she was bullied, but he wanted to sleep with her. In this way, what was the difference between him and Shi Sheng, who wanted to bully her? Even if they were congenial, it couldn't be now. Otherwise, there would inevitably be a knot in his heart, which might accompany him for the rest of his life. "Well, we're both tired today. You can rest here. I'll go to another room." Finally, Yang Chendong resisted the impulse and said such a manly sentence, at least he thought so. Then he got up and was about to leave. But the same arm stretched out across the air. "Dong Shui, forgive me, okay? I really haven't thought it through. I'm still worried about Sister Mu and Wei, I understand. Go to sleep. When you wake up tomorrow, you can pretend that nothing happened." Yang Chendong sighed. Madame Shui had something on her mind. Fortunately, he didn't sleep with her at this time. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. No. Seeing that Yang Chendong was about to leave, Madame Shui was unwilling to let him go. She was just not ready, and she was worried about Mu Lily and Wei, That was why she couldn't devote herself to him. But in the end, she really didn't hate Yang Chendong. She even liked him. It was just that today was not the right time. But she couldn't give her all, and she couldn't let the sixth young master leave. Otherwise, who knew whether this man would be angry or not? If so, she was afraid that she couldn't find a way to make up for it. I'm scared. I'm willing to ask Dong Shui to stay with me. Can you hold me and sleep until dawn? He could only hold her but couldn't do anything. If it were other men, they wouldn't agree. Weren't you testing me? But Yang Chendong unexpectedly agreed. Maybe he really had a good impression of Madame Shui, or maybe he also wanted to feel what it was like to sleep with a beauty in his arms. Of course, there was another possibility. The sixth young master was really sleepy. Don't scold the prodigal. No matter what the reason was, Yang Chendong fell asleep with Madame Shui, who was only wearing a dudu. During this time, their heads were very close, but in the end, they really didn't do anything. They even had sweet and quiet smiles on their faces. Early the next morning, after Qiao Yin got up, she first took a look at the courtyard. She didn't see the sixth young master, who was exercising. She couldn't help but be very curious, so she went to the bedroom. Here, although Beta Persei was guarding, he didn't stop Qiao Yin when he saw her coming. He just turned a blind eye, but his ears were already pricked up, as if he knew what was going to happen next. Sure enough, just 3 seconds after Qiao Yin entered the sixth young master's bedroom, there was a scream. Following that, Qiao Yin staggered out of the bedroom, her face pale and powerless. After that, she leaned against the door and covered her face and cried. This scene fell into the eyes of Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, and he quickly closed his eyes. As a close guard, who didn't know Qiao Yin's feelings for the young master? But now, another woman had taken the lead, so it was reasonable for her to be sad. Not long after Beta Persei closed his eyes, Yang Chendong, who had changed his clothes, appeared in front of the door. He reached out and helped the tearful Qiao Yin up, then whispered something in her ear. In an instant, the rain turned into sunshine, and Qiao Yin's face turned into a smile. Ha ha ha. Yang Chendong laughed after seeing this, then shouted to the dark, "What are you looking at? Why aren't you running with the young master?" Beta Persei, who was hiding in the dark, didn't know what kind of trick the young master was playing, but when he heard the order, he appeared in a flash and followed Yang Chendong. This caused Qiao Yin to be very happy, as if she had made a big mistake. The two of them went out of the courtyard, one after the other, and went straight to the backyard's playground. Leaving behind Qiao Yin, who had already changed into a smile, he turned around and entered the house. Then, his laughter echoed throughout the bedroom. Chapter 88. Qiao Yin was very happy because the young master had told her that he had only comforted Mama Shui. Although he liked Mama Shui as much as he liked her, he did not want her. If you don't believe me, you can go into the house and check. You can even ask Mama Shui to dance as a test. If she had really lost her real body last night, how could she have the energy to dance? Her body probably wouldn't allow it. Because of this, Qiao Yin easily believed Yang Chendong. She even thought that if the young master needed anything, he would definitely look for her first. After all, they had been in a relationship for many years. Yes, that must be it. After the backyard was settled, Yang Chendong seemed to be much lighter when he started running. Beta Persei, who was following behind him, was very curious. How could he still be so energetic after a tiring night? Of course, Yang Chendong didn't need to explain this to him. After returning from the 5-kilometer run, Qiao Yin had already prepared the bath water, but this time there was an extra helper by her side, Mama Shui. After the bath, the three of them had a peaceful and pleasant breakfast together. Tiger's mane appeared again, and not only that, but also the charming Mu Lily and the maid Little Wire followed behind him. Sister Mu, Little Wire. The three women were very excited to see each other. Tiger's mane stepped forward and said, "Young master, it's all done. These are the 3 slave contracts." As he spoke, he placed 3 pieces of paper with official seals and handprints in front of Yang Chendong. "Well, you've worked hard. Go and rest." Yang Chendong waved his hand. Originally, he could directly burn these 3 slave contracts, but in this way, the 3 of them would not be able to get rid of their lowly status for the rest of their lives. Greetings, Dong Shuai. After the 3 women met, they all knelt in front of Yang Chendong with grateful expressions. Get up, all of you. From now on, you have to abide by the rules here. Don't kneel if you don't need to. Yang Chendong said helplessly. He really didn't like this etiquette of kneeling when meeting people. Unfortunately, everyone seemed to be willing to play this game. For example, Tiger's Mane and the others beside him, he didn't know how many times he had said it, but it still didn't work at all. They still knelt when meeting people. Xie Dongshui. Whether or not the 3 girls would kneel in the future, no one knew, but their thanks were very sincere. Alright, since you've left 100 Flower Hall, you're now part of my Yang family. I don't keep idle people here. This is a new story I've written. You can think of how to act it out together. These are the manuscripts. You can study them yourselves. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. She took out the script of The Legend of White Snake that she had prepared a long time ago. There was a very clear plan for the distribution of roles. With this, she could play the roles of Lady Snow and Mu Lily, the former top courtesan. Did they know that this was a job for them? The 3 girls hurriedly agreed, then took the manuscripts and went to the backyard. When only Xiao Yin was left, she walked up softly. Young master, although they've left 100 Flower Hall, they're still lowly, young master knows. I'll find a way to change their names. Yang Chendong rubbed his head as he spoke. Changing their names was easy to say, but difficult to do. Especially when they were targeted by Shisheng. If he found out that someone had changed Lady Snow and the others' names, he would definitely come looking for trouble. How could he solve this problem? Young master, there's a eunuch called Mao Mu outside the manor. He said that he's an old friend of yours. Just as Yang Chendong was thinking about how to do this at the lowest cost, Beta Persei appeared and reported Mao Mu's visit. Oh. It's him. Huh, someone sent me a pillow when I was sleepy. Please. After hearing who it was, Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. Is it a eunuch? Does young master want him to do this? But Shisheng's brother is also a eunuch. Xiao Yin was very smart. Looking at the young master's expression, she knew what he was thinking, but she still reminded him with some worry. It's okay. The relationship between eunuchs is not that united. Young master knows. Yang Chendong said confidently. As the saying goes, evil people need evil people to deal with evil people. Originally, he thought about whether he should use some kind of thunderous method to make Shisheng disappear, but he didn't expect Mao Mu to come at this time. That was the best thing that could happen. In the study, Yang Chendong gave Mao Mu a very high level of courtesy and met him here. Being able to meet in the study meant that the 2 sides had a close relationship. Mao Mu, who was very familiar with this, was very excited. Although the eunuch group was very powerful now, there was Wang Zhen and his henchmen above them. In addition, there was another force, Jining, and a few other small forces. He was just one of them who was not famous. Yang Chendong was now in the limelight. Even Chief Steward Wang Zhen had to look up to him. Logically speaking, this person did not have to treat him like this at all. It would be understandable if he just sent someone to talk to him. However, at this time, he was meeting him in a private place like the study. The meaning of this was already obvious. Lord Yang. As soon as the 2 sides met, Mao Mu cupped his fists and looked very respectful. Eunuch Mao, you don't have to be like this. We are considered old friends. In the future, you can call me the 6th young master, or Dong Shuai to others. Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He looked like an old friend as he spoke. Good, Dong Shuai is a good name. If possible, I will call you Lord Yang, Dong Shuai from now on. Mao Mu's ability to follow the flow was not low. When he saw Yang Chendong being so polite, he immediately agreed. Good. Since you are an old friend, I will definitely not treat you unfairly. Men, bring the things here. Yang Chendong laughed loudly, as if he was very satisfied with Mao Mu's attitude. Then, two people walked in from outside the study. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei carried a heavy wooden box and placed it in the center of the study. You can leave. Yang Chendong said casually, then gave Mao Mu a look that said, you know what I mean. This is. Mao Mu was very curious. After getting Yang Chendong's permission, he stood up from the chair, walked to the wooden box, and reached out to open it. There was a flash of white light. It turned out to be a box of silver ingots. Looking at the quantity, there were at least 5,000 silver ingots. This is. Mao Mu was indeed a little dizzy from the silver ingots, but he was even more surprised. He did not understand why Dong Shuai would think so highly of him. He originally came here to ask for a favor, but before he could even open his mouth, the other party had already given him benefits. This made him unable to speak his next words. Seeing the surprise in Mao Mu's eyes, as well as the trace of greed in them, Yang Chendong laughed loudly and said, Eunuch Mao, I said that since we are good friends, there is no reason for us not to be friends. I am just giving Eunuch Mao these. I hope that Eunuch Mao can rise to the top. This way, as a good friend, I can also bask in the glory. His words were clear. This was to make use of each other. However, with your current status and identity, Mao Mu, it is far from enough. Therefore, I support you and support you to have more power. In the future, we can all be on equal footing and do great things together, right? In the face of Yang Chendong's initiative to show goodwill, Mao Mu had no reason to reject it. He had always believed that he had the ability. What he lacked was only the opportunity and enough foundation. What was the foundation? That was to have enough background for him to use. In the palace, scheming were the most important, but money was equally important. If you don't have money, there won't be anyone willing to risk their lives for you. Naturally, it will be difficult for you to do anything. Now, Yang Chendong took out more than 5,000 silver ingots. For the current Mao Mu, this was not a small amount of wealth. With this, he could rope in more people in the palace for his use. He did not dare to say that he could do great things, but it was not a problem for him to do some small things in private. As for the other need, which was the so-called opportunity, with Yang Chendong, he could use this opportunity to become the link between Dong Shuai and Director Wang Zhen. After all, there were some small matters that the two of them couldn't possibly talk about in person. In that case, his role in this matter would increase, and at the same time, it would also expose the fact that he met Chief Steward Wang Zhen frequently. This was an opportunity. Seeing that Yang Chendong could make up for what he lacked, Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master. At this moment, when Mao Mu looked at the sixth young master, he felt like he was looking at his biological parents. Dong Shuai. With a plop, Mao Mu knelt down in front of Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong's eyes lit up. This person's ability to judge the situation was not bad. He knew when to lower his head. Feeling that he had found the right person, he was satisfied. He pretended to be panicked and asked, Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? However, Yang Chendong was only talking and did not have the intention to help him up. Seeing this, Mao Mu knew that he had to express his attitude. Since he had already knelt down, what was the point of saying some words to show his loyalty? Dong Shuai, this old servant is grateful for your appreciation. In the future, if there's anything you need, feel free to say it. Blade Mountain Flame Sea Guild only needs a word from Dong Shuai, and this old servant will do his best to accomplish it. His face was full of sincerity. Replacing this old servant with this old servant was already a way to express his loyalty. Until now, Yang Chendong was satisfied and bent down to support Mao Mu. Eunuch Mao, what are you doing? I said that we are friends. Thank you, Dong Shuai. Taking the opportunity to stand up, Mao Mu knew that he had passed the first test. From now on, he was Dong Shuai's man, sharing honor and disgrace. After becoming friends, there were naturally some things that were less roundabout. Mao Mu talked about the matter of diapers. He used himself as a witness to prove the importance of this thing to eunuchs. This time, he wanted to get some more so that he could use them for himself, offer them to steward Wang Zhen, and sell some for money. Chapter 89. That's not a problem. I can naturally provide you and Wang Zhen for free, but I can't do that for the other eunuchs. You have to know that the cost of making this thing is very high, and it's not something from the great Ming Dynasty. It comes from the sea. Do you understand? Yang Qindong pretended to be mysterious as he spoke. When Mao Mu heard that the thing came from the sea, he immediately understood. During the great Ming Dynasty's maritime ban, once it came into contact with the sea, it would be a huge expense. Dong Shuai, this old servant understands. I will sell this thing at a high price in the imperial palace. After all, there is no free lunch in the world. If you want to get something, you have to pay a price. Very good. Seeing that Mao Mu was so understanding, Yang Qindong nodded approvingly. Go back and do your job well. If you need anything, just tell me. This young master will do his best to satisfy you. By the way, there is something I need you to do. These are 3 lowly women. I need to raise their status and make them into good people. Is there any problem? Yang Qindong said with a smile as he placed 3 contracts in front of Mao Mu. These 3 people may have offended Shi Ning and his brother. You have to think about it carefully. Mao Mu's hand had already reached out and was about to touch the contracts when he suddenly heard Yang Qindong's words. His hand paused in mid-air, but he quickly continued to reach out. Don't worry, Dong Shuai. Although it's a little troublesome, Shi Ning's power in the palace is not small. However, there are still many people who don't like him. As long as the money is in place, there won't be any problems. Then let's get it done quickly. How much money do you need? Yang Qindong nodded. Shi Ning was indeed powerful, but if this Mao Mu that he found couldn't solve such a small matter with the help of a large sum of money, then there was really no meaning in supporting him. What he needed was a helper, someone who could do things. For this, he was willing to pay the price. However, if the other party was a pile of mud, then there was no point in supporting him. Mao Mu was very clear that this was the first time Dong Shuai had given him something to do. If he did it well, his future would be limitless. If he messed it up, he might not even be able to guarantee his current position. Even if it was for himself, he had to do it well, and he had to do it beautifully. Mao Mu left with 5,000 taels of silver and a pile of diapers. Compared to when he came, he seemed to have straightened his chest when he left, and it was clear that he was full of ambition. Shi Sheng had been on duty for most of the night. When he was off duty, he slept all the way until lunch. When he was full and energized, he brought a few of his subordinates and headed straight for the home of Fan Ling, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of War. Last night, Tiger's Mane had suddenly appeared and used an unimaginable amount of money to buy the slave contracts of Lady Xue and the other 2. Fan Ling had already had the idea of exchanging 100 Flowers Hall. Without a pillar, 100 Flowers Hall could no longer regain its former glory. Although he could find new people to train again, how long would that take? Ever since his old father, Fan De, passed away, the influence of the Fan family was far from what it used to be. This also made Fan Ling want to withdraw from the red light district. He was wondering who to find next. At this time, Shi Sheng came. Although the price he offered was not high, or even a little low, Fan Ling still sold 100 Flowers Hall without any hesitation. It was still the same sentence. Without Lady Xue, 100 Flowers Hall had lost its greatest value. Making a move in time might be the best choice. Xisheng did not expect things to go so smoothly. He offered a relatively low price and waited for Fan Ling to raise the price. Then, everyone would bargain for a while. As long as the other party did not ask for too much, he would accept a price that was about the same. Last night, 100 Flowers Hall was very lively. In his eyes, a deal that could get both a beauty and money was suitable. However, Fan Ling was actually so tactful. Even when faced with the low price he offered, he still accepted it. This allowed him to pay a lot less in terms of cost. At this moment, it was as if he could already see a mountain of gold placed in front of him. Of course, there was also that white and beautiful body waving at him. After leaving Fan Manor, Xisheng took the contract of 100 Flowers Hall and found a place to have a good drink with a few of his men. He decided not to rush to make the matter public. He would go to 100 Flowers Hall in the evening and give Madame Xue a surprise. After knowing the truth, her face would become extremely beautiful. The group of people drank a lot of wine. In the end, their bodies were swaying a little. Only then did they support each other to reach the 100 Flowers Hall. However, once they entered, the atmosphere was very different from yesterday. Although there were still many people, they were all noisy and angry. Some of the people who came today were former regulars of 100 Flowers Hall, but most of them came for the 2 new songs. When they arrived here with a large sum of money full of expectations, they heard that Madame Xue had disappeared. Even Mu Lily, the procuress, was nowhere to be found. How could they let it go? They began to shout one by one. "What are you shouting for?" Seeing the chaotic atmosphere in the hall, Xisheng placed his saber on the table in front of him and roared loudly after a loud noise. This move was indeed effective. As soon as this voice came out, the originally noisy scene suddenly became much quieter. Everyone stared at Xisheng, their eyes were filled with confusion. What was this person doing here again? Why was he acting all high and mighty? This shout shocked everyone. Xisheng was very proud. He liked the feeling of being the center of attention. "Okay, stop shouting. If you have any problems, tell me. I will solve it for you. By the way, I forgot to tell you that 100 Flowers Hall will be mine from now on. This is the contract of the transaction." In order to achieve the effect of justice, Xisheng took the initiative to show the contract in front of everyone. Immediately, several people of status came forward. After reading the contract, they all nodded at the same time. Among them was Wang Si, the editor of the Hanlin Academy. "Shi Qianhu, since this place is already your property, may I ask if you still want to sing tonight? If you sing, of course, we'll pay the same amount of money. We'll spend it however we want. But if you don't sing, we will leave now. No matter how powerful you are, you can't force us to pay 1 tael of silver here." Wang Si's grandfather was the current minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Ji. With such a relationship, he was not afraid of a small Qianhu of the Brocade Guard. Even if this person's brother was very favored by the emperor, his pride as a scholar made him not shrink back. "That's right, that's right." With someone taking the lead, the people below naturally chimed in. No one was afraid of spending money, but spending money wrongly and becoming a sucker wasn't something anyone wanted to do. Xisheng did not care about Wang Si's criticism. Smelling of alcohol, he said complacently, "Who said I won't sing? Since I bought this place, of course, I want to make money. How can I destroy my own livelihood? Well, I will go to the procuress, Mu Lily, now and ask her to arrange Madame Xue to sing for everyone. Not only that, but she will sing 3 or 5 times today to let everyone enjoy it." In order to prove his courage as a new boss and win people's hearts, Xisheng announced loudly. His answer also attracted loud applause from the guests. They all said that Xisheng was a righteous and heroic person. Everyone's compliments made Xisheng feel even more confused. He laughed heartily and arranged for his subordinates to find Mu Lily. This time, he was going to order the beauties around as the boss. After all, he was not the first person to ask about Mu Lily and Madame Xue's whereabouts. When the subordinate ran back and whispered something in Xisheng's ear, Xisheng's face suddenly turned gloomy as he roared, "What's going on? They ran away?" "Yes, they were taken away in the morning." The subordinate answered carefully, for fear that Xisheng would stab him in anger. "They were taken away in the morning? Who did it?" Xisheng had sobered up a lot. His intuition told him that things were not so simple. Why was it that as soon as he made his move, someone else beat him to it? Furthermore, he had just announced the fact that as soon as he became the new owner of 100 Flowers Hall, the flower pillar under him had disappeared without a trace. This was already not only cutting off his source of income, but also slapping him in the face, and it was an extremely resounding slap. If this matter could not be solved, he was afraid that he would become a laughing stock in the capital. No one could accept that kind of result. In the face of Xisheng's questioning, the few subordinates naturally kept silent, revealing a look of bewilderment. "Investigate. Investigate for this lord. Whether it's to the heavens or to the earth, find out for me." Xisheng's roar resounded in the hall of 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment, he was really furious. Xisheng was enraged. As a result, a few of his subordinates scattered in all directions. Along with them, the other players also left. Since they couldn't listen to the music anymore, who would stay here and be Xisheng's next punching bag? Of course, Xisheng's subordinates did not run away. They went to investigate the whereabouts of Madame Xue and Madame Xue. The strength of the embroidered uniform guards was very strong. In less than 2 hours, they got the news and came back. Seeing his subordinates come back excitedly, Xisheng knew that the result was out. He immediately asked with a fierce look, "Tell me, where did they go?" At this moment, Xisheng felt that he had lost face. What he wanted to do most now was to catch Madame Xue and Mu Lily, and then use all kinds of means to let them know how regretful it was to offend him. "Sir, there's news. It said that they went to the Xianxia village 15 miles south of the city." A subordinate ran up and reported as if he had received a reward. Chapter 90. Yang Village. Hearing that she was not in the capital but out of it, Xisheng's eyes were filled with anger, but at the same time, he was very happy. As an entertainer, she didn't stay in her own place of business. Instead, she ran around and even left the capital. Just based on this, he could use legal means to deal with her without being afraid of taking any responsibility. Let's go to Yang village to catch her. He quickly made a decision in his mind. He would catch her immediately and bring her back with thunderous means. First, he would get the beauty, then the money, and then his reputation. He would let everyone know the consequences of provoking him. Before the curfew in the city, Xisheng went out of the city. In addition to his original 4 or 5 subordinates, he mobilized soldiers from 2 small banners. In total, more than 20 people rushed to the south of the city. As soon as Xisheng and the others went out of the city, they were seen by a pair of dormant eyes. There were fast horses galloping on a short road. They were spies of the security bureau. They had been paying attention to the movements of 100 Flowers Hall. Xisheng went out of the city. Seeing that his destination was Yang village, their task was to send the news back to the village. In Yang village, Yang Chendong was watching Madame Snow sing the new song by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng in the backyard. However, no matter how he looked at it, Madame Snow could not enter the stage. She looked absent-minded. Alas! Knowing what Xisheng was worried about, Yang Chendong shook his head. Sure enough, he could not do anything if his mind was not calm. Since that was the case, he could only wait for Xisheng to take the initiative to fall into the net. However, he did not know whether Xisheng would come here in anger. If he did not come, wouldn't it be troublesome? Yang Chendong did not like to wait passively. He preferred to take the initiative to attack. After not getting any news from Xisheng, Yang Chendong even thought of secretly sending someone to kill Xisheng. All he needed was a new sniper rifle and a spotter. It was guaranteed that he could easily take care of this person from 1,000 meters away. No one would know. Report. Tiger's man's figure appeared in the backyard. His appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Young master, Xisheng has brought over 20 embroidered uniform guards and is rushing towards us. Tiger's mane said excitedly as he half-knelt and cupped his hands. Obviously, this did not scare him. On the contrary, he was very excited. Okay. Yang Chendong was also excited after hearing this. Is it finally here? Let's go out and welcome him. Ha. Yang Chendong laughed and walked out of the backyard in his cyan robe, leaving Mu Lily, Madame Shui, and Little Wire in a panic. Fortunately, Qiao Yin also stayed here. She had followed the sixth young master to Cheng City. Knowing the young master's strength, she smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. Everything is within the young master's plan. There won't be any problems. You should continue to practice. When the young master comes back, try to perform better." Qiao Yin said it casually, but her nervousness could still be seen from Madame Shui and the other two. After all, they knew too little. Although Dong Shui was extraordinary, he had offended the embroidered uniform guards. Last year, even duking suffered in front of them. Could Dong Shui, a new official, solve the problem? Of course, Yang Chendong could solve it, and there were many ways to do so. For example, if he showed his fangs, he could make Xisheng and more than 20 people disappear silently. No one would be able to trace it back to him afterwards. However, without evidence, it didn't mean that they couldn't suspect him. Whether it was the East Faction guards or the embroidered uniform guards, they didn't need any solid evidence. As long as they suspected you, they could take action. This was the damn privilege. Yang Chendong, who knew this, couldn't take this risk. Since he couldn't use his own strength, he could only borrow others' strength. After leaving the backyard, Yang Chendong began to remind Tiger's mane, who had become excited. Tell the brothers below not to move. Without the young master's permission, no one is allowed to move. Otherwise, they will be grounded for 3 days. By the way, I asked you to invite Lord Hu Zhangning to drink in advance. How did it go? Upon hearing that he would be grounded for 3 days, Tiger's mane, who had been full of fighting spirit, immediately became obedient. For these iron-blooded men, there were too few things in the world that could scare them. Because they weren't afraid, they became even more difficult to control. When he was at the docks, there were brothers who liked to cause trouble. However, no matter what kind of corporal punishment they received, they didn't seem to care at all. They just treated it as training. Later, the matter spread to Yang Chendong's ears, and he came up with the idea of confinement as a punishment. However, when people were locked up in a dark room for 3 days and had to eat and drink as usual, anyone who heard of this punishment was amused. Wasn't this just letting them rest? What kind of punishment was this? For a time, there were even people who deliberately caused trouble and wanted to experience this feeling. Naturally, the consequences were terrifying. No one spoke, no one paid attention to them, and they couldn't even see the slightest bit of sunlight for 3 days. Not many people could bear it. They roared, they cried bitterly, and they reflected on their mistakes. However, they could only be released after 3 days of confinement. When they finally came out and saw the sunlight and saw that there were people to talk to, they, who had almost collapsed, finally understood the severity of confinement. Although Tiger's mane hadn't experienced it personally, he had heard of this matter long ago. At the docks and Crimson City, everyone's expression changed at the mention of confinement. Now that Yang Chendong came up with this punishment, he couldn't help but be disobedient. Young master, don't worry. Without orders, no one will dare to do anything. Also, Lord who is on duty today. He's waiting for young master in front of the potato field. Especially when he heard that the young master personally invited him, he seemed very happy. Happy? Yang Chendong didn't understand and shook his head after hearing this. At this time, the night was dark and the wind was cool. If it wasn't for the good moon tonight, he really didn't know what was so happy about having someone on a date. However, even if Hu Changning didn't object, of course, it was something that Yang Chendong wished for. He immediately nodded and said, "I'll go meet Lord Hu now. Remember to follow the plan." Yes. After Tiger's mane agreed, his entire body flashed and disappeared into the darkness, as if he had never appeared. Walking alone, Yang Chendong arrived in front of a large potato field. From afar, he could see a table filled with food and wine. On one side of the table was an empty seat, while on the other sat the guardian of the ironclad guard, Hu Zhangning. At this moment, Hu Changning was indeed in a good mood. This wasn't because he accepted the mission to protect the potatoes, but because of Yang Chendong's appointment. Hu Yen came to the Yang village and was very happy when she returned. She brought back many good things. All of this seemed to prove one thing, and that was that the relationship between his beloved daughter and Yang Chendong was not bad. As a father, the happiness of his children was naturally something that he greatly hoped for. Yang Chendong was young, but his performance was indeed old and steady, and his talent was outstanding. In addition, his family background was not bad. No matter how one looked at it, he was a good son-in-law. At least, he had already received the approval of his future father-in-law. In the middle of the night, when Yang Chendong personally invited him, Hu Changning thought that it must have something to do with his daughter. Could it be that he wanted to test his attitude? That must be it. Hu Changning confirmed his thoughts. He also decided to properly meet with Yang Chendong. Even if he was satisfied, he still needed to give him an appropriate beating. He wanted to let the sixth young master know how fortunate it was to be able to marry his daughter, and that he needed to know how to cherish it. In his heart, he was still thinking about how to beat Yang Chendong when they met. In the distance, the sixth young master, wearing a long green gown, walked over. Yu Guang had already noticed, but Hu Changning didn't have any intention of speaking first. Tonight, he was acting as the father-in-law. No matter what, he had to be reserved. Hu Changning didn't speak, and Yang Chendong didn't have any intention of speaking either. He couldn't guess the other party's thoughts, and even more so, he didn't think that he had only met Hu Yen once, and it actually involved the discussion of marriage. In his consciousness and thoughts, no matter what, he had to wait for a period of time first, and wait until everyone was familiar with each other before making a decision. After all, marriage wasn't child's play. It had to be done carefully. Yang Chendong's consciousness of the future made it impossible for him to guess Hu Changning's inner thoughts. Seeing that the other party didn't speak, the sixth young master was more than happy. What he wanted was to use the other party's identity and big shot to trick Shisheng. Before the main show started, he didn't know what to say. In this way, the two of them sat down like this. Then, without saying a word, they lowered their heads and drank like this. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little oppressive. Yang Chendong didn't speak, but Hu Changning wasn't unhappy in his heart. Instead, he was still excited. This must be him thinking about how to phrase it. Hee, since it's like this, I won't say anything. I'll just wait for you to take the initiative to bring it up and give you an invisible pressure. In the future, when his daughter really marries into the family, he will have more dignity as the father-in-law. Hu Changning thought self-righteously, and wanted to use this to put pressure on Yang Chendong to show the power and means of his future father-in-law. It was this strange combination of thoughts that made the two of them have no intention of leaving even though they didn't say a word. The atmosphere was delayed under such subtle emotions. When they had drunk no less than 5 glasses of wine, Hu Changning was a little impatient. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, this sixth young master's ability to keep his composure is pretty good. He can actually keep his composure. If this goes on, can we still talk about serious matters tonight? Is it going to be like this for the whole night? If so, it doesn't matter if the other party is young, but I'm in my 40s after all. Isn't this tormenting me? Chapter 91. Hu Xiangning's heart began to palpitate, but Yang Qindong did not notice. At this time, he was thinking, after scheming against Xisheng tonight, what would his brother, Xi Ning, do if he found out? How would he put out the fire? How would he do it step by step? He must have offended them, but how could he not find an opportunity to get angry? As for that Wang Zhen, would he step in and interfere? Would he be forced to make a move under the influence of benefits? What if Wang Zhen did not care? If that was the case, he could only take the risk and get rid of Xi Ning and Xisheng early. But if he did that, it would be impossible for him not to attract attention. Yang Qindong was still thinking, but Hu Xiangning had been holding back for a long time. Finally, he could not take it anymore. After smacking his lips, he decided to take the initiative to speak. For the sake of his daughter's happiness, what was wrong with giving the other party a way out? Hu Xiangning had already thought of what to say and was slowly opening his mouth. At this time, the sound of running suddenly came from the distance. The sound of footsteps was especially loud in the dark night, and attracted the attention of Yang Qindong and Hu Xiangning. Knowing that the person in question had appeared, Yang Qindong immediately reacted and shouted according to his plan. "Who are you? This is a place of great fortune, stop." His voice was like thunder, and it was hard to imagine that it came from the mouth of a scholar like Yang Qindong. This shout was so loud that Hu Xiangning, who was at the side, only felt his eardrums hurt from the shock. How could he still think of asking anything? On the other hand, the newcomer was far away, so he wasn't affected much. Seeing a young man in green shouting there, he quickly responded, "Who are you?" "This official is Yang Qindong, the crown prince's horse servant." "Who are you?" "Stop." Yang Qindong had already seen the other party's attire with the help of the moonlight. He knew the other party's identity, but he still asked and shouted for the second time. The person who came was Xisheng. Since he was a Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard, the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards wouldn't stop him. Since they were all part of the same system, he would still give them some face. Not to mention that Xisheng had rushed here with an anxious look on his face, giving people the impression that he had received an important mission. Therefore, no one would be foolish enough to stop him. Xisheng smoothly entered the interior of the Yangjia village. Along the way, he also learned about Yang Qindong's identity from his subordinates. It was just a matter of being promoted to a secondary class rank 5 official position because of the emperor's favor. There was nothing to be afraid of. Although he had Yang Rong as his father, that old man had been dead for many years. He was someone who could even bully the current Duke Ying, so why would he be afraid of a little brat? It was precisely because he knew Yang Qindong's background that Xisheng was no longer afraid. What he wanted was to find this person and teach him a lesson, letting him know his methods. Then, it would be much easier to ask him to hand over Madame Xue and the others. As soon as he entered the Yangjia village, he asked his colleagues where Yang Qindong was. When he learned that Yang Qindong was drinking with Hu Xiangning, he hurried over. Because he was too anxious, his subordinates were left dozens of meters behind him. When he came from afar, he heard a young man shouting. Then, when he knew that this person was his target, Yang Qindong, Xisheng was overjoyed. Without answering, he waved the embroidered spring saber in his hand and rushed straight to Yang Qindong. "Ah! What are you doing?" Yang Qindong's eyes were fixed on Xisheng. He was going to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. When he saw that the other party didn't say anything and waved his saber, he stepped back first and shouted, "What are you doing? This is a place of great auspicious holy objects. I am also an official of the imperial court. The emperor personally appointed me as the crown prince. What are you going to do? Yang Qindong's panic-stricken appearance was a perfect representation of a scholar who saw a soldier and was unable to reason with him. This scene was also seen by Hu Zhangning, who was at the side. The aftershock of the vibration of the eardrum was completely absorbed. At this moment, Hu Zhangning also realized that someone was going to harm Yang Qindong. How could he let it go? If something happened to the sixth young master, how could his daughter argue with him? Not to mention that he happened to be at the scene. Whether it was public or private, he had no reason to ignore it. Clang! The sword bestowed by the emperor was pulled out of the scabbard. Hu Zhangning jumped in a few big steps and stopped in front of the rushing Xisheng. Seeing that Yang Qindong was getting closer and closer, Xisheng's expression changed. Just as he was about to wave his saber, he recognized the person's identity with the help of the moonlight. He said, "So it is Lord Hu. I am Qianhu Xisheng. Why are you stopping me?" Ah! This voice was so familiar. At such a close distance, Hu Zhangning recognized the person's identity and couldn't help but be startled. What was going on? Why was it Xisheng? Hu Zhangning, who couldn't react quickly in his mind, was stunned there. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xisheng flashed past him and continued to chase Yang Qindong in front of him. Xisheng didn't have the intention to kill. He also knew that if he killed Yang Qindong here, the consequences wouldn't be something he could bear. Even if his older brother Xining helped, there would be no avoiding a lawsuit. Therefore, he only wanted to scare the other party. As long as the other party admitted defeat and admitted his mistake, it would be enough to restore his face and reap enough benefits. In Xisheng's eyes, it was not difficult to do this. With his skill, wasn't it easy to catch a scholar who was close to him? Although Xisheng was domineering, his martial arts were not bad. At least he looked agile. On the other hand, Yang Qindong, who was being chased, had a panicked expression. He kept shouting and yelling, as if he would catch up at any time. However, it was precisely because Yang Qindong looked like he could be caught up at any moment that Xisheng was unable to succeed. There were several times when he was about to slash at Yang Qindong with the back of his saber, but for some reason, Yang Qindong managed to dodge. That person was still dodging randomly, as if the reason he could not hit him was that his luck was too good. Was Yang Qindong really that lucky? During this chase, he saw at least 7 or 8 openings that Xisheng revealed. If he wanted to, he could have beautifully seized the saber with his bare hands and killed the other party. However, he couldn't do this. The other party was the Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard. No matter what the reason was, if he killed the other party in public, it would be a big mistake and he would be held accountable. He couldn't fight back. He could only escape and then find the best opportunity to dig a big hole for Xisheng. Qianhu Shi, what are you doing? Are you openly killing an imperial court official? Stop it right now. In a flash, Xisheng jumped over him and rushed to Yang Qindong. This made Hu Zhangning break out in cold sweat. He shouted and wanted to chase after him. However, at this time, Xisheng's subordinates arrived. They naturally didn't dare to do anything because of Hu Zhangning's identity, but they could still stop him. Hu Zhangning, who found that he was surrounded, was anxious. He knew that he was outnumbered and couldn't find any opportunity. He immediately shouted into the darkness, "Little bastards, why don't you come out?" As soon as he shouted, at least 50 embroidered uniform guard rushed out of the darkness. Among them was Lieutenant Sun Chuang, who had been beaten 10 times before. These people were the ones on duty today. They were responsible for the safety of Potato. They had been watching from afar since Yang Qindong and Hu Zhangning drank together. They didn't understand the reason, but they saw Xisheng kill with their own eyes. However, seeing that the people who came were also embroidered uniform guard, Sun Chuang and the others couldn't show up for a while. Who knew what had happened? They didn't want the divine armaments to fight and implicate them. But then, Hu Zhangning's shout came. With the orders of the superior, these people couldn't hide anymore. They all showed up in the darkness and surrounded the group of people brought by Xisheng. A wise man wouldn't fight when the odds were against him. Seeing that there were more people than them, Xisheng's subordinates began to scatter and flee. Some of them took the opportunity to rush into the protected potato field. For a time, countless bean seedlings were trampled, making a mess. Because of the appearance of Hu Zhangning's subordinates, the place became completely chaotic. And in this chaos, Xisheng finally grabbed Yang Chendong's arm and raised the embroidered spring saber in his hand high. No! Hu Zhangning, who was a few meters away, saw this scene clearly with the help of the moonlight. He immediately shouted to stop it. Xisheng was taken aback by this shout. At this moment, Yang Chendong, who was caught, suddenly moved his arm. He didn't know where the strength came from, but it made his right hand numb. Then, the saber fell down and landed on Yang Chendong's chest. Suddenly, a stream of bright red blood spurted out and sprayed on Xisheng's body, dyeing his flying fish robe red. Ah! At the same time, the green-clothed Yang Chendong fell to the ground in a timely manner. When Yang Chendong fell, the eyes of Hu Zhangning, who was chasing after Yang Chendong, had already turned red. He was unable to control his anger, and when he arrived behind Xisheng, he stabbed out with his sword. Feeling a gust of cold wind behind him, Xisheng habitually dodged to the side, but in the end, because of the potato vines under his feet, he was a beat too slow. It was because of this beat that his right leg was slashed by a long sword. The sharp sword immediately cut through a meridian, and Xisheng painfully fell to the ground with a plop. Tie him up. After stabbing Xisheng, Hu Zhangning shouted loudly. Then, he stretched out his hand in front of Yang Chendong, who was lying on the ground. At this moment, an even faster figure suddenly appeared in front of Yang Chendong. He quickly carried him on his back and ran straight to the Yang family manor. Chapter 92. The person who came was Tiger's man. He had been secretly observing the situation. When he saw that the young master had been cut and was bleeding, he immediately became anxious. Without caring about anything else, he rushed out and carried Yang Chendong on his back. Then, he recklessly ran into the manor. Beta Persei also appeared with him. He didn't snatch the job of carrying the young master, but he did stay where he was. He stared coldly at Hu Zhangning, a huge murderous aura leaping out of his body. It was clear that he was ready to kill if there was any disagreement. Who are you? An embroidered uniform guard didn't understand. Seeing that someone was blocking in front of Lord Hu, he wanted to step forward and question him. However, before he could move, he was stopped by Lieutenant Sun Chuang at the side. Get back! With an angry roar, he pushed the blind embroidered uniform guard behind him. Others might not know, but Sun Chuang, who had suffered in the Yang family's old manor in Jianghu Manor, was very clear about Beta Persei's strength. Now that his master was injured, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was enraged. Hu Zhangning naturally recognized Beta Persei and knew how powerful this person was. He didn't act rashly, but still said out of concern, I just want to see how Yang Shima's injuries are. There's no need for Lord Hu to worry. My master has the elixir in his hands. Beta Persei spoke as if he could hold back 10,000 men. Then, he stared coldly at the crowd, all the muscles in his body ready to explode at any moment. Feeling the pressure of that aura, Hu Zhangning knew that he couldn't force his way in. He turned around and vented his anger on Xisheng. Come, capture all these people who destroyed the auspicious land. Tomorrow morning, when the city gates open, we will enter the palace to see the emperor. With Hu Zhangning's order, the embroidered uniform guards who came with Xisheng were beaten to the ground one by one. Any slight resistance was met with a series of punches and kicks, making them cry for their parents. Yang Manor's inner courtyard. Tiger's man ran back with bloodstains on his back. As soon as he entered the side hall, he was seen by Xiao Yin and the other girls. "Ah! Young master!" Xiao Yin only managed to shout once before her vision blurred. Then, her body fell to the ground. Fortunately, the maidservant Xiao Wei reacted very quickly and reached out to catch it to avoid the danger of touching the ground. Dong Shui. Madame Shui and Mu Lily also shouted in surprise. Then, their faces turned pale and they didn't know what to do. On the other hand, Yang Chendong, who was being carried on his back, was still very calm. He said to Tiger's mane in a weak voice, "Wake Yin, up and let her apply medicine for me. No one else is allowed to enter my bedroom without my orders." "Yes." Tiger's mane replied with tears in his eyes. On the other side, Xiao Wei had already shaken Xiao Yin awake. After knowing the young master's intention, she ignored her weak legs and hurried to the bedroom. Yang Chendong, who entered the bedroom first, was placed on the bed by Tiger's man. After seeing that there was no one around, he let out a sigh of relief and said, "Hey, Tiger's man, can you run slower next time? Do you know that the young master was originally fine? But when you jolted me on your back, I almost suffered internal injuries." As he spoke, Yang Chendong threw a bag of chicken blood to the side and took off the bulletproof vest under his green robe. There was a cut on the bulletproof vest, but it was only a scratch. As for the underwear under the bulletproof vest, there was not a single scratch. Tiger's man's eyes widened. "Young master. What about me? Your skills were all taught by the young master. Why don't you think that Shi Sheng, with his mediocre skills, can hurt me?" Yang Chendong asked with an expression that said, "Why don't you use your brain?" After speaking, he did not wait to see if Tiger's man understood. He continued, "The young master's injuries will continue to be feigned. Before this matter is resolved, no one is allowed to enter the bedroom without permission. But if anyone comes, just tell them that the young master is sleeping. Xiao Yin is the only one taking care of him." After speaking, Yang Chendong waved his hand. Tiger's man left the bedroom in a daze. At that moment, Xiao Yin rushed over with tears in her eyes. Before she even entered the room and saw Yang Chendong, she began to cry loudly. "Young master." He reached out to touch his forehead. "Yin, the young master is fine. Don't cry like that. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll scare him until he falls ill." "Ah." Xiao Yin covered her small mouth with her hand. At this moment, her face was like a pear blossom in the rain. She saw that Yang Chendong had already bared his upper body, revealing his well-built muscles. It was so perfect, and he didn't look the least bit injured. At that moment, she did not care about the difference between men and women. She sprinted forward and gently stroked his bare chest with her small hand. Then, with a look of surprise, she said, "Young master, are you the reincarnation of a god? Are you invulnerable? He was clearly covered in blood just a moment ago. How could he be completely fine now?" This was simply unbelievable. The young master is not the reincarnation of a god, nor is he invulnerable. It was just a show. Yang Chendong smiled as he picked up the half-filled bag of chicken blood on the ground. "Look, this is why you were bleeding just now." After Yang Chendong's detailed explanation, Xiao Yin realized that the young master was indeed not injured. It was something called a bulletproof vest that protected him. Everything was just a show. After learning the truth, Xiao Yin breathed a sigh of relief. Then, with a pleading tone, she said, "Young master, can you promise Xiao Yin that you won't scare me again in the future? All right, don't do it again, don't do it again." Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Then, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "But you still have to act. Yin, also needs to cooperate with the young master, understand?" Xiao Yin's ear was tickled by that breath. She was already blushing and could only nod vigorously. As for what the young master said and what he wanted her to do, she probably could not hear clearly for a while. Outside the bedroom, Madame Shui, Mu Lily, and Little Wei were kneeling. Dong Shui was injured because of them. They were kneeling here to pray for Dong Shui and to get better soon. Otherwise, even if they died now, they would be too ashamed to face anyone. In the small courtyard outside the bedroom, Yang Er and Yang Si stood at the door. They were like two gatekeepers guarding the door, preventing anyone from coming in to peek. No matter how much Madame Shui begged, they could only shake their heads in disapproval. This time, the sixth young master was injured. As the family's guards, they were responsible. Now, they could not wait to receive the military order to kill Xisheng. At this time, they were still full of anger. How could they be nice to others? No matter how beautiful Madame Shui was, at this time, in their eyes, she was nothing more than a pink skeleton. How is Yang Shima? Outside the small courtyard, Hu Zhangning rushed in with an anxious expression. Beside him was Lieutenant Sun Chuang. Stop. Seeing the two people coming, Beta Persei said unceremoniously. Hearing this, Hu Zhangning and Sun Chuang could not help but stand in place. This person had left a big shadow in their hearts. As soon as they saw this person, they could not help but feel weak in the knees. Looking at this person's ferocious face, no one dared to rush over. It was unknown when, but Tiger Ray had appearing directly opposite Hu Zhangning. Lord Hu. After cupping his fists in greeting, Hu Mang said in a booming voice, "Young master is currently applying the medicine. Once the medicine takes effect, he will most likely fall asleep. Fortunately, the wound is not very deep. There should be no problem after a few days of recuperation. How is Xisheng now?" First, he politely told them that the young master was fine, but it was not appropriate for them to visit him. Then, he turned the blame to Xisheng. "It's good that Yang Xianma is fine. This is also my negligence. As for Xisheng, he is currently imprisoned, and because the gates to the capital are closed, he cannot enter. Once the gates open at dawn, this lord will personally escort Xisheng into the palace to meet his majesty. When the time comes, I will definitely give Yang Xianma an explanation," Hu Changning said angrily. At this time, he hated Xisheng to the core. Xisheng took advantage of his brother's power and didn't put him, a superior, in his eyes. He even hurt his future son-in-law, Yang Chendong. Just now, he had seen dozens of people running around in the fields. Who knew how many potatoes they had destroyed in that short period of time? He had to give an explanation for all of this. Then he could only use Xisheng. Although he did not want to offend the eunuchs, he did not want to take the blame for no reason. Xisheng was destined to be unlucky this time. Everything would depend on how much help his brother, Xi Ning, could give him. Xisheng was going to be in trouble. Good, I hope Lord Hu can do as you say. As for here, I ask Lord Hu to go back first. My lord is asleep and will not see anyone. Tiger's man wanted Hu Zhangning to express his position. When he found out that the young master was only acting and wasn't really injured, the anger in his heart had lessened by a lot. If that wasn't the case, the brocade guards wouldn't have been able to stop them from snatching the victory, and the result would have been 1,000 cuts. Hu Zhangning wanted to ask if Yang Chendong's life was in danger. After all, from the scene at that time, he had lost a lot of blood. Now that he knew that Yang Xianma was fine, he was relieved. He knew that he had missed this opportunity and it was not appropriate to force his way in. Moreover, whether or not he could force his way in was another matter. He could only cup his fists and say, "Thank you for your hard work. This official will take his leave first. I will visit Yang Xianma in 2 days." Hu Zhangning left. When he left, his complexion was obviously much better. Yang Chendong's life was not in danger. This matter could be salvaged. At least, his guilt was not so great. As for how this matter should be resolved, it needed to be decided by the emperor. It was not something that a fourth-rank official like him could decide. Chapter 93. Madame Snow and the other two girls were still kneeling on the ground. The three girls had been sobbing since Hu Zhangning came in and left, as if they were the biggest sinners who had hurt Yang Chendong. In the bedroom, Qiao Yin had already helped Yang Chendong take a bath and lie on the bed. Only then did she remember that Madame Snow and the other two girls were still kneeling outside the yard. She asked carefully, "Young master, what should we do with them? It's late at night. They'll get sick if they keep kneeling like this. Ask them to leave. Forget it. Ask Madame Snow to come in and ask Mu Lily and Wire to leave." Yang Chendong thought for a while and shook his head. If he did not let them in, the three girls would not listen to him and leave. He didn't want to end up causing the three girls to fall sick while he was fine. "Okay," Qiao Yin answered obediently. At this moment, she was not jealous at all. The young master could not be her only young master. She had thought about this for a long time. With one more sister to take care of the young master, perhaps the young master would live a happier life. As long as the young master was happy, she would be happy too. Outside the bedroom, Madame Shui got the message and could enter the bedroom. Mu Lily and Wire both breathed a sigh of relief. They were worried that they couldn't do anything. Now that Madame Shui could go in and help, they could go back to rest. At least, they didn't have to feel so guilty. Madame Snow followed Qiao Yin into the bedroom with a worried look. She saw Yang Chendong lying on the bed. At that moment, she couldn't stop her tears from flowing out. With a plop, she knelt down and said, "Dong Shui, it's all our fault for implicating you. We've already made a decision. Tomorrow morning, we'll enter the city and ask for forgiveness from Shisheng." Nonsense. Yang Chendong, who was going to rest, immediately opened his eyes. His expression suddenly became very serious. "Remember, your lives belong to the young master. Without the order of the young master, no one can make decisions without my permission. As for Shisheng, he can't even protect himself. He won't make trouble for you." Seeing Yang Chendong's serious look, Madame Snow trembled with fear. She knelt on the ground and did not dare to make a sound. Qiao Yin came forward, helped her up, and then whispered something in her ear. Madame Snow's face changed again and again. Finally, she looked at Yang Chendong with confusion. Her eyes were full of disbelief. Yang Chendong naturally knew what this gaze meant. At that moment, he did not hold back and directly lifted the blanket, revealing his strong and uninjured chest. He said, "Look, look. Yin did not lie to you. I am indeed not injured." "Ah." Madame Snow did the same thing as Qiao Yin. She covered her mouth with her hand. Her face was full of disbelief. After seeing so much blood in the side hall, she thought that Dong Shui was going to die. Who would have thought that he would be fine? How did he do that? "All of you, come over here. This young master will tell you slowly." Madame Snow's surprised face was so cute. Yang Chendong's heart skipped a beat. His body reacted unconsciously. He waved his hand and asked Qiao Yin and Madame Snow to come to his bedside. The two women did not suspect anything and hurriedly came to the side of the bed. Suddenly, a pair of big hands reached over and forcefully pulled the two women into the bed. Suddenly, a masculine man's breath rushed into the two women's nostrils. "Ah!" At this moment, they realized what was going on. They instinctively wanted to struggle, but when they remembered that the person hugging them was Yang Chendong, the two women suddenly blushed. They just lowered their heads and didn't resist at all. "Not bad. It's easier to talk like this." "Huh." Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Although he was not ready to do anything, especially with two women at the same time, it was a very happy thing to have beautiful women in his arms. The two women were very cooperative. They leaned on Yang Chendong's broad shoulders. Their faces were full of shyness and happiness. "Come on, sing a song for the young master." Put me to sleep. Feeling that his body was about to react unnaturally, Yang Chendong suppressed his thoughts and said to Madame Snow. Okay. Madame Snow was very obedient. She immediately sang the song that she had just learned, by Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. Don't sing a new song. Sing an old song for the young master. Yang Chendong was used to listening to the songs of the later generations. He did not know much about the songs of the present, so he wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about them. The next moment, Madame Shui began to play an old tune. The lingering melody was like a lullaby. Before long, Yang Chendong began to snore. He was really tired. There were too many things he had to do and think about in the past few days. He had to bear all the pressure by himself. Yang Chendong had actually fallen asleep, causing Xiao Yin and Madame Snow to involuntarily smile. Next, the two women made the same shameful action, which was to take off their coats, leaving only their undergarments. They leaned against Yang Chendong and snuggled up to each other. Not long after, they fell asleep. The guards outside the bedroom, Beta Persei and Yang Si, had been replaced by Yang Wu and Yang Lu. In the dark, Dao Shao and a team of 10 guards were secretly watching everything to prevent anyone from getting close to the small courtyard. If anyone dared to do so, Jiao Wu, with a silencer and a weapon, would show him the fragility of life. The sky slowly brightened. Hu Zhangning, who could not wait any longer, led a team of 100 brocade guards to escort Shi Sheng and more than 20 men to the capital. As soon as the city gate opened, they entered the city and went straight to the inner city. In the imperial palace, there was no news from the court. The civil and military officials were still gathered in the court as usual, kneeling to the emperor and discussing the affairs of the world. Emperor Zhu Qizhen, who did not seem to have enough sleep, yawned from time to time, and then listlessly listened to the officials' reports. The emperor was diligent in his work. Since ancient times, this had become a custom. Almost all the leaders had to do this. Otherwise, they would not be able to hold power. As such, very few emperors would sleep in. In comparison, Yang Chendong was much more fortunate. At this moment, he was slowly waking up. According to his usual routine, it should be time for him to get up and go for a morning run. However, instead of a morning run, he was greeted with an erection. This was something that all men in their prime would encounter. His body was the first to react. Yang Chendong, who was hugging two women, wanted to get up, but it was very inappropriate. Was he supposed to set up a tent in front of the two women? How embarrassing would that be? In addition, he had to tell others that he was injured. If he could get up and continue to run, it would be inexcusable. Let's go back to sleep. Yang Chendong tried to convince himself. He ignored the warning of his biological clock and wanted to continue sleeping. But at this moment, Xiao Yin's body moved slightly on his left, and her breathing seemed to become heavier. For a long time, Xiao Yin had a very regular pattern of waking up and sleeping. For example, at this time, she would usually get up to prepare to serve the young master. Although she didn't need to make breakfast, she came to the young master's room to tidy it up and fold the blankets. So, the moment Yang Chendong woke up, she also woke up. Her hand inadvertently swept over Yang Chendong's body and touched that towering pillar. In that instant, Xiao Yin completely woke up. Her face flushed red as she recalled where she was staying at this moment. She thought about how the young master was lying next to her and seemed to have a reaction. What should she do? Should she ignore it and continue to pretend to sleep, or should she help the young master? She had heard the old women in the manor say that once a man had that intention, it would be very uncomfortable if it wasn't resolved. Xiao Yin definitely didn't want Yang Chendong to feel uncomfortable. So what should she do? What should she do? Her heart thumped wildly. In just a few breaths, Xiao Yin made a decision. She took a deep breath and mustered up her courage. Her small hand groped toward Yang Chendong's crotch. Knowing that Xiao Yin had woken up, Yang Chendong felt very awkward. Just as he was thinking about how to return to normal, a small hand suddenly touched him. In that instant, his body couldn't help but tremble. The feeling made him feel very comfortable, but also very nervous. It was really indescribable with words. "Young master, let Yin serve you." Suddenly, he heard the soft sound of drizzling rain. Before he could react, Xiao Yin had already dove into the blankets and swam towards that place. "No!" Yang Chendong instinctively wanted to stop her. It was this shout that woke Madame Xue on the other side. Due to the nature of Madame Xue's work, she didn't wake up very regularly. In addition, Yang Chendong lying next to her gave her a great sense of security, so she fell into a deep sleep. If it wasn't for Xiao Yin's shout, she probably wouldn't have woken up. After waking up, Madame Xue forgot that she was only wearing a dudu. On the contrary, she only remembered that the young master seemed to be injured. "Is he feeling unwell?" she asked anxiously. When Yang Chendong saw that Madame Snow had woken up, he felt a little awkward. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Yin moved. In that instant, he felt a warm sensation spread throughout his body. He couldn't help but shiver slightly. Along with the shiver, he let out an "oh" sound from his mouth. "I'm so scared of crabs. I'll omit 100,000 words here." Chapter 94. While Yang Chendong was still blissfully confused, the court, which was originally calm, was in an uproar because of Hu Zhongning's sudden arrival. "Your Majesty, this is the entire story of what happened last night." Hu Zhongning knelt on the ground and explained in detail what he saw and heard. Then, he lowered his head deeply, as if he was waiting for the emperor's judgment. After Hu Zhongning told the story of what happened in Yangjia village, the court officials suddenly exploded. Without the emperor's order and without the slightest evidence, a Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard dared to kill a fifth-rank official who had just made a great contribution. This was simply lawlessness. Not to mention, according to Hu Zhongning's explanation, a lot of potatoes were also wasted because of this. Overnight, Lord Hu brought people to dig up the trampled land and found that the potatoes in the field were greatly damaged. Many of them were already deformed. Of course, they didn't know that all of this was arranged by Yang Chendong in advance. Those potatoes were also cleaned up in advance. They didn't know that all of this was done by Yang Chendong, but they knew that the loss of potatoes was a loss to the court, the country, the emperor, and the court officials. Immediately, as the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zuo was the first to jump out. Originally, he was worried that there weren't enough potatoes. Because of this, he wanted to discuss with Yang Chendong and ask him to contribute more potatoes from his private fields. But now, not only did the country's potatoes suffer from the loss of production, Yang Chendong was also injured. If he couldn't punish Xisheng now, how could he negotiate with him? If he didn't punish the murderer, how could Yang Chendong be satisfied? If it were him, how could he be satisfied? "Your Majesty." With a plop, he knelt on the ground. "Xisheng has no respect for your Majesty, no respect for the law of the country, and did things based on his mood. He actually wanted to kill a court official. If this matter isn't severely punished, I'm afraid that the hearts of all the court officials will be cold." With Wang Zuo taking the lead, the Minister of Rights, Hu Ming, also knelt on the ground. For the sake of his son's future, he had to ruthlessly deal with Xisheng this time. Otherwise, if he had already offended Xisheng's son, wouldn't he be punished afterwards? "Your Majesty, this subject agrees with Lord Wang's request to severely punish the murderer Xisheng." This subject agrees. Duke Ying, the representative of the military, Zhang Fu, who had always been a wooden block in the imperial court, was also kneeling on the ground, his face full of resentment. Last year, his family's fertile land had been seized by the two brothers, Xi Ning and Xisheng, causing his reputation to hit rock bottom. After that, he had been depressed and was prepared to spend the rest of his life as a loser. And now, the opportunity to counterattack had come. The two civil officials had taken the initiative to jump out. How could he be polite? He immediately expressed his thoughts. After the three of them, the other officials and generals also got down on their knees one by one, all of them wearing indignant expressions as they cursed the lawless and overjoyed man. Ingzong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, had an ugly expression on his face. He had long regarded the potato as a great auspicious item and announced it to the world. It was equivalent to an imperial item. But Xisheng actually dared to bring people to attack and trample on the auspicious item. This was simply ignoring the existence of imperial power. Even if you have enmity with Yang Chendong and want to deal with him, you can find a safe place to do it. Why do you have to do it on the auspicious item's crops? Isn't this the same as the god of longevity hanging himself? Are you tired of living? At this moment, Ingzong really wanted to order Xisheng to be killed as a warning to others. But at this time, Wang Zhen, who was standing on the side, opened his mouth. "Your Majesty, this matter is really strange. Why did Lord Shi kill Yang Shima? Why did he choose to do it on the auspicious item's crops? All of this needs to be investigated. In this old servant's humble opinion, we should first clarify the whole story before making a decision." Originally, Wang Zhen was very angry after hearing Hu Xiangning's words. He also wanted to kill Hu Xiangning to relieve the hatred in his heart. After all, he and Yang Chendong already had a common interest. Just yesterday, Mao Mu, the court eunuch of the ceremony directorate, gave him a good item called diapers. With it, he really didn't need to worry about embarrassing himself on the spot because of his body. Wang Zhen also knew that these things came from Yang Chendong's hands and were brought to the palace by Mao Mu to sell. The main consumer group was the court eunuchs. Moreover, a single diaper was not cheap and actually cost 2 taels of silver. Fortunately, he could get 10% of the benefits from these 2 taels of silver. Many little drops make an ocean. Naturally, it was a profitable way to make money. With a common interest, Xisheng still wanted to harm Yang Chendong and even wanted to kill him. This was an unforgivable matter. But no matter what, this person was Shi Ning's younger brother and his only brother. Just based on this point, he had to stand up and speak up. The reason why Wang Zhen could have such power, other than Zhu Qizhen's great trust in him, was that he had the support of most of the court eunuchs. It was precisely because he had such confidence that he could be so unscrupulous and smooth when doing things. Shi Ning was one of the more powerful ones among those who supported him. If he couldn't speak up for Xisheng in this matter, then he would naturally offend him and his leadership position would be shaken. This wasn't something he wanted to see. This was why he hesitated and spoke up to help, wanting to entrust this matter to Zhu Qizhen. Originally, he already had a decision in his heart, but after hearing Wang Zhen's words, Ingzong immediately gave up his original idea and nodded in agreement. "That's right, teacher's words are very reasonable. We have to investigate this matter thoroughly first. How about this, teacher will handle this matter. Once there is a result, we can just let us and the officials know." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Wang Zhen quickly knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty is wise. All right, if there's nothing else, you can leave the court." Ingzong waved his hand. He was in a bad mood this morning, so he didn't have the heart to govern. He raised it up high and gently put it down. The matter actually ended like this. After the emperor left, Wang Zhen gave an order. "Send Xisheng to the imperial prison. At the same time, send Ji Ning to Yangjia Manor to investigate this matter. Since the power was in his hands, the person he sent must be a trusted aide." Ji Ning, this trusted aide, was put to good use. The officials who were still kneeling on the ground were all furious when they heard this answer, but there was nothing they could do. This matter had already been handed over to the East Ministry to handle. The result would most likely be reduced to a small matter and a small matter to nothing. As for the victim, Yang Chendong, he was after all still too young. Shisheng alone was enough to injure him. Once the East Ministry stepped in, how could he withstand the pressure? At least, the officials didn't have any hope. Yangjia Manor. Early in the morning, the sixth young master had a pleasant and happy morning. Although it was the first time Qiao Yin had done such a thing, she still satisfied him with her cherry lips, allowing him to completely vent the depression he had been feeling for many days. Madame Snow finally understood what had happened. She immediately blushed and felt ashamed. Fortunately, Yang Chendong pretended to be asleep, which saved everyone from embarrassment. However, the three of them knew that after this morning's incident, their relationship had changed subtly. Even Wan Shi was afraid to take the first step. Once he took the first step, many things would follow naturally. Qiao Yin and Madame Snow even began to discuss who would serve him at night. Breakfast was served by the two women and delivered to Yang Chendong's mouth. He couldn't help but enjoy the bliss of having two women. This time, not only was his stomach full, but his big hands were also moving up and down. He was addicted to touching the two women and gained a lot of benefits. Naturally, the two women wanted to reject but still welcomed him, causing the bedroom to be filled with the sound of panting. All the happiness slowly dissipated after the appearance of Tiger's Mane. Young Master, Ji Ning from the Eastern Palace is here. He brought many tonics, saying that they are for young master to nourish your body. Eunuch Mao Mu is also here. He is waiting in the side hall. Yang Chendong's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that the people from the Eastern Palace had condescended to give him gifts, and Wang Zhen had not only sent his confidant Ji Ning but also Mao Mu, it was obvious that he wanted to make peace. In that case, Shisheng should be fine now. Thinking of this, Yang Chendong couldn't help but sigh softly. Originally, he thought that since he had given the potatoes to the emperor and many benefits to Wang Zhen, he should be considered an important person in the other party's heart. Today, he had been wronged, so they should stand up for him. But now, it seemed that he had been too optimistic. He was just 1,000 commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Shisheng. Because he had a powerful elder brother, Shi Ning, everything that he had given up had become a thing of the past. In the end, he still had to become the sacrifice, the one who had to give in. After treating me like this, if this young master doesn't replace me, what else can I do? The incident had caused Yang Chendong to understand the truth. With such an emperor and a eunuch who couldn't differentiate right from wrong, there was no hope for him. If he allowed this to continue, there would be a day when he would become a sacrifice. At that time, it would be too late for him to regret it. After firming up his inner beliefs, Yang Chendong suppressed the idea of starting a riot now. The target in his heart was too big, and the number of Han people he needed was unimaginable. If he were to start a war now, although he was confident that he wouldn't be defeated, the ones who would be harmed in the end would still be the Han people and the common people. This was not something he wanted to see. For the sake of this goal, he could only endure for now. Tiger's Mane, I won't be seeing Ji Ning. Call Mao Mu over. Chapter 95. Since he was prepared to back down, Yang Chendong had to put on a show of respect. What was the point of meeting Ji Ning? To make him lower his head in front of him? The sixth young master would never do such a thankless task. In the side hall, Ji Ning sat on the left while Mao Mu sat on the right. Both of them were looking straight ahead. Gentlemen, the sixth young master has a message for eunuch Mao. Please enter his bedroom. Lord Ji, if you have something to do, you can go ahead. Tiger's Mane entered the hall and clasped his hands. Ji Ning stood up with a satisfied look on his face, as though he had expected this to happen. Good. Then I'll take my leave first. Please send my regards to the sixth young master. Ji Ning's task was to mediate between the two of them. In order to achieve his goal, he had to lower his head when necessary. Fortunately, Yang Chendong was tactful. If he didn't want to see Ji Ning, he wouldn't have to see Ji Ning lowering his head. Ji Ning had to accept this favor. Good. Lord Ji, I'll definitely pass on your message to my young master. Tiger's mane understood Yang Chendong's intentions and was naturally very polite to Ji Ning. Ha ha ha. Ji Ning laughed loudly and turned to leave, his face full of self-satisfaction. Mao Mu was left behind. He asked Tiger's mane anxiously, did something happen to the sixth young master? Please follow me, eunuch Mao. You'll know when you see him. Tiger's mane knew that Mao Mu had already sided with his young master. But even so, unless the young master ordered him to do so, he wouldn't say a word. The bedroom was still filled with fragrance. Naturally, it was the fragrance left behind by Qiao Yin and Madame Snow. As soon as Mao Mu entered the bedroom, he immediately sensed the scent. He couldn't help but be delighted. This at least proved that the sixth young master's injuries weren't serious. Now, he could be at ease. He had just expressed his loyalty yesterday. If something happened to the sixth young master today, he really didn't know what to do. You're here. Take a seat. Yang Chendong leaned against the headboard and looked at eunuch Mao Mu with a normal expression. Sixth young master, are you all right? After this old servant found out about it, I was so anxious that I couldn't even eat. All right, tell me what eunuch Wang thinks. When Yang Chendong saw that Mao Mu was about to use his flattery, he had no choice but to interrupt him and get straight to the point. Knowing that the sixth young master didn't like flattery, Mao Mu tactfully stopped and got down to business. Eunuch Wang said that he hopes that the sixth young master will be magnanimous and spare Xisheng for the sake of him and eunuch Xining. As for the conditions, he allows this old servant to be promoted to eunuch penning of the ceremony directorate. Although I'm ranked last, it's still a big step up. At the same time, he promises that Xisheng won't cause trouble for the sixth young master. Also, when you do things in the capital in the future, the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards will give you face and won't cause trouble for you. After saying these words, Mao Mu lowered his head a lot. He received the most from this so-called exchange, so he didn't have to say anything more. Mao Mu's promotion from attendant to penning of the ceremony directorate was a step that many people wouldn't be able to achieve in their lifetime without enough merit or ability. This was equivalent to a small eunuch becoming the head of eunuchs, and these were the conditions that Wang Zhen had to pay. As for the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards not causing trouble for him, it was better to say that they were giving him face than saying that they were threatening him. The meaning was very obvious. If Yang Chendong didn't agree and insisted on killing Xisheng, then these two departments would keep an eye on the Yang family manor. If there was even the slightest movement, the Yang family would be in big trouble. Humph. After understanding the crux of the matter, Yang Chendong's expression turned cold. This Wang Zhen was really an ingrate that couldn't be fed. Fortunately, he had less than a year to live. Otherwise, with the sixth young master's temperament, he would probably send Tiger's mane and the others to take his life tonight. Don't bother with a person who's about to die. Let people off when possible. Take a step back and you'll see the world. All kinds of advice from saints flowed into Yang Chendong's mind, making him finally make up his mind to take a step back. As for what would happen next, he would urge Gao Xiong and the others to take action on Ryukyu Island. He had to quickly seize more territory. Only when he was strong would others not dare to bully him and ignore him. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. When he finally returned to reality, Yang Chendong smiled and patted Mao Mu on the shoulder. Good. This young master used a knife wound in exchange for your promotion. No matter how I look at it, it's a good deal. How about this? When you go back, tell eunuch Wang that this matter is over. Sixth young master. At this moment, Mao Mu was so touched that his nose turned sour. He thought that in the face of a powerful group of eunuchs, Yang Chendong would give in, but he didn't expect him to be so straightforward. If that was the case, it seemed that the biggest beneficiary was himself. He'd only been with him for 2 days, and he'd been promoted twice. The path he'd chosen was indeed correct. Okay. I don't like to express my position through words. I'd rather see everything put into action. How is it? How are diapers selling in the palace? Yang Qindong didn't bring up the previous matter and spoke in a casual manner. It's selling very well. After all, it's like these things are tailor-made for us eunuchs. Now, all the eunuchs with some status come to me to get the goods. Because of this, some people have bad ideas. But this time, I've been promoted twice, and I have eunuch Wang behind me. Others don't dare to do anything to me. When talking about the situation in the palace, Mao Mu's tone became much more excited. He thought of yesterday afternoon, when several eunuchs who used to ignore him took the initiative to greet him and called him Eunuch Mao. He felt a burst of elation. Good, very good. Continue doing what you're doing. For those eunuchs who have requests but don't have money, you can have them use other things in exchange. For example, some information they've heard. Then, sort out what you think is useful and send it to this young master. Do you understand? Yang Qindong said encouragingly. Mao Mu was a chess piece he'd buried in the palace, and on the surface. At the very least, Wang Zhen knew that the two of them had a deep relationship. But this was just a smokescreen. In reality, he wanted information from the palace, and he wanted to use Mao Mu as the center to quickly develop his own power. In the eyes of the sixth young master, the intelligence war wasn't just about information from the capital. He had to know all the information from the officials and the palace. Only then could he make the most accurate decisions. This servant understands. Mao Mu patted his chest and promised, and then he added, I also know a few things about Brother Xi Ning's illegal activities. As long as the sixth young master needs it, I can send someone to sort it out at any time. There's no need. Remember, you're only looking for information. Before you've stabilized your position, don't think about dealing with anyone. On the contrary, you have to maintain good relations with everyone. Do you understand? Yang Qindong shook his head. Xi Ning's fate had already been explained in history. As long as nothing unexpected happened, someone else would deal with him. There was no need for him to do anything. Although Mao Mu didn't understand why Yang Qindong had such a good temper, since his master had said this, as a servant, he had to obey, so he immediately agreed. Just as the officials had expected, after Wang Zhen took over the Yang clan, he quickly sent someone to reach an agreement with Yang Qindong. No one knew what sort of promise had been made, but in any case, Yang Qindong, the victim, was no longer pursuing the matter. As a result, some of the officials who wanted to take advantage of the situation had no chance. In the palace, Wang Zhen did not go back on his word and promoted Mao Mu to head eunuch of the ceremony directorate. Henceforth, this person would be one of the leading eunuchs in the organization. The gloomy Xi Ning walked into Wang Zhen's room. Once there was no one else present, he immediately got down on his knees. My thanks to Eunuch Wang for saving my brother. If you have any orders, Xi Ning will do his best to repay them. Eunuch Xi, what are you doing? Get up, get up. Wang Zhen helped Xi Ning up from the ground with a smile. We all serve His Majesty, so isn't it only right for us to help each other? As for that Yang Shima, he magnanimously let this matter pass. You two brothers should know how to be grateful. At least for the time being, don't think about provoking him, understand? Since he had promised not to harass Yang Qindong, Wang Zhen had to do it. At least for the time being, he still had to do it. This was also related to his own interests. Yes. Since Eunuch Wang has spoken, I will naturally obey. Then, do you need this eunuch to personally go to the Yang clan and meet the multi-talented Dong Shuai? Even though Xi Ning was smiling, his face still gave people a gloomy feeling. Perhaps only when he was on duty in front of His Majesty would his smile become truly brilliant. That's not necessary. This eunuch asked Ji Ning to go there before, which is already giving him enough face. There's no need for eunuch Shi to make a trip for such a small matter. Wang Zhen shook his head. Regarding Yang Chendong, his feelings were somewhat complicated. No matter what, this person was the descendant of the 3 Yang Chendong. Logically speaking, this person should be his enemy. But for the sake of benefits, they were bound together. Within a limited range, he would help as much as he could. But once things got troublesome, he would decisively give up on Yang Chendong. Of course, he didn't need such a chess piece in his eyes. He also didn't want more people to come into contact with him. It was enough to have Mao Mu as a bridge. As for Shi Ning, this person was extremely smart. If he was able to establish a connection with Wang Zhen, who knew how much benefits he would get. Shi Ning said this just to express his attitude. He didn't want to make things too difficult for Wang Zhen. Since he didn't need to make an appearance, who would be willing to make an apology? He immediately promised that he wouldn't find Yang Chendong to express his gratitude, nor would he cause trouble for him. In the future, everyone would mind their own business. Then, he asked about his younger brother Shisheng. This was the main reason why he came. He asked when his younger brother would be released. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.